Hello and welcome from Las Vegas. This is the Raptors Reaction Podcast presented by Betway. I'm your host, William Liu. Raptors unfortunately dropped their first game of Summer League, losing by a score of 86-76 against the Utah Jazz. To people watching live on YouTube, thank you for waiting. It took a while to sort of change up. We got a little double booking with the studio setup. That's why we've got a blank wall behind me. But I promise you we're here in Vegas. You can hear the noise in the background. Zach Edey, once again, is not playing. But, yeah, on the Raptors side, this was a very tough matchup. I think Utah, they have obviously accumulated a lot of prospects over the years. They've been rebuilding as well. And weirdly enough, it almost felt like the Raptors were playing the old Raptors, Vision 6'9" level Raptors, because they just had big, athletic players across the board switching, and they did a great job of doing that. And the Raps really struggle to generate any offense. I mean, outside of Javon Freeman-Liberty, who was the leading scorer for Toronto here with 24 points in the starting lineup, there just wasn't very much creation for the Raptors. And I think some of that obviously is inexperience. Jama called it after the game a learning experience for his group to, figure out how to attack against switches, which is quite difficult. But quite frankly, you can learn a couple of things too, and maybe the Raptors could have executed a little bit better. But it just felt like they didn't have a physical advantage at any given moment, and that made it really difficult offensively. Now, of course, I know it's a little bit more disappointing when they lose, but at the same time, I think you learn more when they lose. You get to see sort of what else they got to work on, because we've been talking about how great this team looked the first two games. When they drop the third one, all of a sudden you can look at sort of, okay, what are the next steps for some of these guys? So first and foremost, Grady and Jonathan Mobo did not play. There's no firm update going forward as to whether or not they will participate in the next Summer League game or that fifth one that they'll play at some point. But, Grady was there courtside. Jonathan was there, before the game as well. Grady seemed to be looking okay. But, again, if they want to be cautious, of course, that's their sort of this Summer League. Guys want to be cautious, that's okay. Without those guys, it created more of an advantage in terms of just, other players being able to sort of step into the opportunity. And we saw certain guys elevated, playing more minutes. Javon, first and foremost, sliding into that starting lineup. But a guy like DJ Carton getting more minutes off the bench. The Raptors, leaning a little bit deeper into, Dylan Disu, for example, was getting some minutes off the bench, guys like that. But in terms of the players that you've heard about, the players that we've been tracking over the course of the Summer League, I think number one for me, it was more of a difficult matchup for guys like Brandon Carlson and Jamal Shead. It was interesting because watching them, I was thinking about where they were relative to their Utah Jazz counterparts, right? Because Jamal was going up against Isaiah Collier, who was the 29th pick that the Raptors ultimately traded to Utah for Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk last year at the deadline. He was matching him against a first-rounder. And for Brandon Carlson, he was matching him against Kyle Filipowski, who was taken in the second round, earlier in the second round. I'm just comparing them based on positions, but just seeing how they did relative to each other. I think for me, Jamal, in this one, defensively, I thought he was stellar. The amount of plays where he sacrificed his body, the amount of plays where he, hit the deck, the amount of plays where don't even go in the box score, but it's like he pressures them and the guy drops the ball out of bounds, or he's, creating a deflection, or there's a loose rebound and the team's going to go the other way and he breaks it up and it tips it out instead and they got to inbound and the Raptors get to reset their defense rather than guarding in transition. There's at least 10 plays like that over the course of this game, and that's sort of what you can come to define about him. He's shot out of a cannon, he's guarding the ball, and he's swarming guys. Now, the reason I was really interested in this matchup is because Collier, who played with Bronny at USC, Collier is a really physical guard. I mean, he's got a head as big as mine, and he's very, very wide just in general, very strong, especially for a young player. And Jamal, what he's been able to do is sort of use his strength to sort of lock up certain guys. But it's hard to do that with obviously a Collier who's more physically imposing. But at the same time, you saw Jamal being able to sort of disrupt, and sort of just create deflections. And on the defensive end, you really have no complaints, at all. He gives it his absolute best. He's competing. It's noticeable how much harder he plays than pretty much everyone else on any given moment. Now, I think on offense, that's where it's a little bit more tricky, right? Because Jamal so far right now has been pretty conservative from three, I would say. He's knocked down a decent percentage, but he hasn't taken a ton of them. He's not actively looking at space to get open for the threes as much. And even when he does, sometimes he hesitates. That's something we've known about, and that's sort of what you got to continue to work on. As a small guard, you absolutely need to be able to nail the three at a high level. And today we didn't get to see enough of that. And today the Raptors really needed that because the Utah Jazz, in addition to being able to switch and contain dribble penetration for the most part, they also were able to pack the paint. And so the Raptors really needed their guards to score. And again, aside from Javon Freeman-Liberty, the other two guys couldn't really score. That's where Jamal really needed to take it to the next level. And even beyond that, it's like, okay, fine, maybe the three-point shot's not there, but what else is there? And you saw him go to one of his moves that he did a lot in college, which would be coming off the pick and roll against the dropping big, which in this case, Utah was dropping quite a bit on defense. And you saw Jamal go for these little push floaters, this in-between shots where he's like somewhat set, but he's also jumping midair and adjusting and shooting those. Honestly, statistically, those are not very efficient shots. Of course, you got to let a player, play comfortably and sort of play to their strengths, but it's not a super efficient shot. And I'm not even saying that because he missed the two of them. I'm just saying that, like, in general, there's got to be a bigger weapon, right? Because you're looking for a guy to go all the way to the rim or a guy who can hit the three. For a guard, especially, you got to be able to hit the three at a higher level. And you just didn't quite see that from him on the offensive end. Now, in terms of, trying to get downhill, set other guys up, that's always something he wants to do as well. But again, like I mentioned, Utah's defenders were really strong, really physical, big, and it was hard for him to sort of get into the lane and consistently kick the passes out. A couple times he got passes deflected. I think that's just passing over top of length. That's an adjustment from college level to the NBA level, right? Like, you look at Utah. This is a team that's not even in the playoffs. This is also their summer league team, and yet, like, the amount of length on the court is just kind of absurd. You look across the board, it's like, who do they? Cody Williams, he's like 6'9", right? He's Jalen Williams' brother. Taylor Hendricks, he's 6'9", and he's gotten so much stronger. He's gotten more buff. Kyle Filipowski, he's mobile 7-footer. You know what I mean? That's all I'll say. And Isaiah Collier, you know what I mean? Like, these guys are just big across the board, and so for Shead, who I've stood beside Shead, like, I'm taller than Shead, like, he's like 6 foot in shoes, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, that's got to be something where he's got to be able to adjust. And, like, if you're going to throw jump passes, you got to really jump to throw those passes, or you got to throw them even earlier before that, they close out, sort of cut down the angles. Those are things that are going to have to be adjusted. But defensively, for me, he continues to be a huge plus, a huge positive. And I always just enjoy sort of a guy who's willing to do whatever it takes. You can see the competitiveness in how often he falls over the ground. It's almost Kyle Lowry-esque in a way. Kyle used to give up his body all the time. I don't have to tell any Raptor fan about that. And Jamal, at least for me, like, he's giving me hints. I'm not saying he's Kyle Lowry. That's absurd, but, like, hints of that. Now, of course, Kyle did so many other things good on the offensive end as well. But, yeah, I think for Jamal, there's something to build off of. His defense is there. For me, surprisingly, the second most impressive player was Ulrich Chomche. Now, he came off the bench just as he has for the entirety of Summer League. Brandon Carlson had a tough matchup against Kyle Filipowski. For the most part, I thought they went back and forth at it. What I like seeing is, like, small little progressions, right? So some of these guys are playing each other for the first time. And there was a play where Filipowski, he likes to turn his back to the play, take a couple hard dribbles, feel what the defender is, and all of a sudden turn into a face-up and then blow by or spin. And the first time he did a spin move against Brandon Carlson was trying to play physical. He's a little bit weaker. He's a little more slender than a guy like Filipowski. And so Filipowski was able to spin him and then go in for a dunk. The next play, when Filipowski had to do the same move, Carlson did a great job of anticipating the spin, forcing Filipowski away from the rim into a turnaround jump shot, and he was able to block that jump shot as well. So even small adjustments like that, it shows you how smart a player is. It's like, okay, I'm playing this guy for the first time, but I'm locking in that this is his move and how I'm going to approach it the next time around. So even that little instant adjustment, to me, like, that's a classic case of basketball IQ, reading and sort of anticipating the play. But I think what was difficult for Brandon is, for him, he's a pick and pop big for the most part, right? So if you're going to pick and pop, you're ideally wanting to see your ball handler come off the high screen and draw two players with him, and then kick it out to the perimeter for a three that he can pop out for. But ideally, you want both players going with the ball handler. In this case, because they're switching so much, there's very little opportunity for Brandon to be able to pop out for the threes. Now, he still knocked out one of them in the corner over a contest, so that's really nice to see. But the consistent impact wasn't quite there. And I think, the other thing is, like, if you're going to create switches, then maybe you put him into the post. The Raptors didn't really do a lot of that right now. And to me, if I had to guess, I don't think they're, like, primarily looking for him to become a guy who can score in the post. But we've seen him, take it down there sometimes for, and ones at the basket or little turnaround jumper here or there. But For the most part, I thought he actually played Filipowski okay. Like, I would say Filipowski played a little bit better. I mean, he's definitely scored more. And again, that sort of half spin, face up, and then drive move was pretty effective. He got Chomche with it too. But, like, there wasn't that big of a difference between those two players. And I think that to me, that's pretty impressive. I mean, Flip was like a really accomplished player in college. But I thought Brandon did okay. Not as like much of a standout as he had been in the previous couple games, but it was also a tougher matchup, as you can understand from sort of the differences in how the team personnel and the switching was. Chomche, though. Chomche was the guy I was the most impressed with, especially in the first half. I thought he was just able to get out there and sort of, use his athleticism, contest. Utah was really, really strong, physical. They were able to get to the rim quite a bit. And you needed somebody who was, just providing some resistance. I mean, to be honest, the Raptors' perimeter defense was good. They were pesky. But at the same time, a lot of the times it was like Utah was able to just back down, draw doubles because there are size advantages, and then play out of those without even having to necessarily break down off the dribble all the time. And so that's where you needed more size. And when you look at Toronto, because of the injuries and all that kind of stuff, but they started like 4 guards. Like, this is where it's like a little more difficult to play Ochai, for example, as a power forward because he's 6'4", right? So even though he's strong and built like Superman, like there just isn't enough height there sometimes to match up the sheer size. That's where I thought Chomche was able to really come in there with his rebounding and contest on the glass, contest at the rim. He's very fearless on that front. And I think offensively, what was interesting is just he looks okay. Like there's these like half moments where it's like you get a rebound or like a tough pass to you in traffic, and if you catch it and you're at a weird angle, like do you know immediately sort of when to quick shoot it? Do you know when to sort of up fake, hold it, and let the guy go by and then like shoot it a little bit? Do you know which angles to play with off the glass? Like those are little like subtleties that I really don't think that he has them completely down just yet. But at the same time, we saw him come up today with a couple of really good finishes around the basket, because like overall field goal percentage is going to be very misleading. What kind of shots are you getting? And there weren't like alley-oop dunks tonight, right? There were like, guys were not creating enough offense for their bigs to get open. And so he was able to sort of catch it, finish it a couple of times with the jump hooks, little floater. The touch to me was good. And even the ability to read what kind of shot to go into was actually better than expected. Second half, we had a much harder time. I think Utah's physicality went to a different level as well. And also, again, Toronto's guards weren't creating that much. And obviously, Chomche is not a one-on-one type of creator. But like, still, to me, it was impressive. Maybe it's because I'm like really expecting this to be a huge project, but at the same time, there's moments already that do make you feel good. But there's also other moments where you're like, holy, this guy is very raw. So this is something where me and Alex were sitting on a media row, and we're watching him, and we're like, wait, is he telling the referee that he needs to tie a shoelace to stop the game so he could tie a shoelace? And I swear he's did that like at least 3-4 times until he finally ripped down the rebound with the shoelaces untied after a couple of possessions and then tied it. But it was like small things like, it's like, guys, they're not going to stop the game for you to tie your shoelace. You know what I mean? It's little things like that. Or like Jamal Shead, there was a play in the last game where I thought it was a really good show of leadership, because Jamal fed Ulrich with a really nice pass. Ulrich wasn't expecting it, and it sailed out of bounds. That should have been an assist. That should have been 2 points. But instead of, showing sort of like any sort of disappointment, Jamal was like, hey, man, that's my bad. That's my bad. It wasn't Jamal's bad, but it was just show his character, being like, you know what? I'm going to try to pick up a guy who's like, he's not his rookie, but like he's like 5 years older than him, or like 4 years older than him, right? But like, yeah, I mean, like you saw the like, you saw the, I don't know why they're screaming over there at ESPN Las Vegas while they're stealing our booth, but like, yeah, seriously, make content. That's good. But like, Chomche like screwed up a couple passes tonight from Jamal, and you could see Jamal trying to throw him some passes in traffic. To be fair, those are not easy passes, and they have to put some zip on them, everything like that. But he did misplay a couple passes. So there are those moments of being raw. And the fact that he committed 7 fouls, those are moments of being raw. But I think he's competing. He's physical. He's like, to be honestly, one of the biggest things is he's got to become more confident in sort of communicating and talking back there. Because we got to talk to him a little bit post game. His English is fine, like it's fine, and maybe understanding wise, he can get better and better, and he will. Obviously, he's more newer to the language, but he can speak it just fine. And I think he's got to talk a little bit more on defense, because that's one of the benefits when you're in summer league and it's an empty gym and you're sitting courtside. You're like, I can actually hear who's talking on defense. I need him to do a little bit more talking on the defensive end, picking up sort of where everyone is, because that's what you would ideally want from your rim protector. But there's a lot of good things there. And it continues to be really cool to just sort of track his career kind of out of nowhere. And by the way, out of nowhere, we talked to them post-game, right? And we had a chance to chat with Ulrich, and he was talking about how, his journey. I asked him about sort of, what's your journey from, where you started basketball to becoming the Raptors. Like, he was somebody who was literally, he said he was a farmer back home, and he started talking about sort of how he was farming, then he went to the NBA Academy in Africa, and then obviously he became sort of like familiar with the Raptors and, got to know guys like Patrick Engelbert, who I believe is a director of global scouting here for the Raptors. He's been around a ton, really nice guy, talking to Masai Ujiri, even talking to Josh. We'll see who Josh is, but I think I have an idea. But, like, he got to know the Raptors organization, but again, like, not even 5 years ago, he was farming. He was like literally, and I asked him, I was like, what were you farming? Like, if you I can't believe this, you were farming. And he was like, yeah, like growing various fruits and vegetables and bananas. And I was like, it's kind of amazing that that's been his story and his journey. And so obviously it's going to take a little bit more time, but I think he's a well-spoken guy. He really is. And he has a lot of stories to tell, and I'm really excited to get to know him just a little bit better and better. But Ulrich, I thought, to me, was a bit of a standout. The rest of the guys, I mean, look, Javon scored a ton, right? And they really needed him to. He knocked down the three at a high level, 6 of 7 from three. I mean, the Raptors only had, 3 of 6 from three. The Raptors only made 6 threes all game, so he had half their threes. He had 24 points. Nobody else even scored double digits. Didn't have a lot of assists, but honestly, like, they need him to score tonight, and he's the only guy who can get to the basket. That's his distinguishing skill. And I thought it was really important. Now, I think maybe the Raptors could have featured him a little bit more, but it's also Summer League. You also want to see how other guys adapt to it. And, I think on that front, you see Ochai Agbaji. Something that I talked to Coach Jamal about at practice the other day was just how are you tracking Ochai's progress on the offensive end? What do you want him to do more of? Because Ochai had told me that, like, basically they're going back to they like had a clean slate in terms of what they want him to do offensively. So he's like almost starting over from like newer in terms of like what is his overall approach. They're even talking about tweaking his shot and everything like that, right? They're really approaching on that front. And so one thing that John was talking about was, he's a really, really, really good cutter, and they really wanted him to sort of like get on the ball in terms of like either as a ball handler or as a screener. And we saw more of that tonight where like 3 or 4 instances they got Ochai to screen for the ball and then for him to roll to the basket. No, I don't mind that. I think it's a decent idea because it's always a way to be able to get a guy more involved offensively is to have them screen for the ball. But I think one of the issues with that is, again, Ochai is 6'4". So, like, if he catches the ball on the roll, if there's somebody at the basket, which you've seen, like, twice now in Summer League, and he's trying to rise up and dunk over those guys, like, the athleticism, like, he's very athletic, don't get me wrong, and he's very strong for his size. But he's not exactly like Charles Barkley at 6'4", rolling to the basket. You know what I mean? Like, he's still a guard at the end of the day. So we saw a little bit more of those. He was able to slip free, but then the finishing at the basket wasn't quite good there. So I think for me, if that's going to be the case where he's going to be more of like a screener and rolling to the basket, he's got to be able to find a variety of ways to finish. Switching hands, left hand, right hand, maybe an up fake once in a while. And if you're going to dunk the ball, really, really go super hard and maybe draw the foul. You know what I mean? Like, but, like, it felt like a couple of times where he's rolling to the basket. There's just, because he's 6'4", and someone else rotating over, like, it was a little bit more difficult for him to finish. Overall, I thought he did fine, though. Didn't take a lot of bad shots. Took one, turnaround baseline jumper. That was nice. Switched it. So there's that. I thought Jacoby, in terms of the other starter for the Raptors, didn't shoot the three very well at all. 0 for 6 from 3. I think that's more consistent with what I've seen eye test-wise from just being around practice and me being a sicko and loving to watch the warm-up report. He's not like he's not like that consistent of a shooter just yet from the NBA range, right? It's not like this is a case where it's because he's shooting on the move or the contest or whatever like that, or he's tired. I think he's just like not at the level yet where he's like switching them every single time. You know what I mean? Like, so there's some inconsistency there, which is normal, like so totally normal. But like, what's interesting for me is, just like he did in college, he continues to be able to get to the foul line. I mean, tonight he got 6 free throw attempts. A lot of those were just up fakes. A lot of those were just like, he understands sort of when to throw up an up fake. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily kill the rhythm of the offense where he's always pump faking and pump faking and pump faking. And it's like, dude, JV, you just got to like either shoot that jumper or take it in the post or swing it. Like, but you can't just up fake like 6 times like this. I think Jacoby has a really good sense of that, and he knows how to jump into guys. I felt like he even got fouled on a 3 that I think he really wanted to call for. But ultimately, like, yeah, he's got to be able to improve his consistency on that front. On the other end, he's got to really improve his ball handling. He's a little too weak with the ball handling. Sometimes, first off, he just like physically can get stronger. He's very wiry right now. But like, even if he gets stronger physically, I think the handle's got to get tighter where it's like you can get to the spots or beat to the spots. I feel like his handle's actually making him slower than he is right now, and that's going to need more work in terms of just getting it tighter because you know what? If he can create a little bit more for himself off the dribble, all of a sudden that's a totally different level of prospect, a different level of scorer than somebody who's more catch and shoot, right? It makes you way more dynamic. And I think the Raptors really believe in him at a high level. I know they had him super high on their boards. And I know that for Jacoby, he's got to continue to sort of improve those secondary skills. But, like, number one, he's got to sharpen up the three-point shot. Number two, he's got to get the handle tighter. Number three, he's got to get stronger overall. All very doable, and nobody needs him to do it right away because we just saw Grady go through a similar process. Aside from that, I mean, guys off the bench, DJ Carden got more extended run, 22 minutes for him. You know, solid. I think, you know, he was talking about afterwards how about just his – process for getting back from injury, and you know it's sort of been his first action since he first joined the Raptors. I know he's a bit of a, you know, we don't really know that much about DJ because he got injured almost right away and it happened in practice. He didn't even see what happened, but he described it as one of the worst injuries of his career, and he had to really learn how to mentally get through this. And so you're seeing him right now in sort of a little bit more of a rusty state. He says he's actually more athletic than he is right now, which honestly, he's got some really great highlight dunks. If you want to go out there and look for Iowa Wolves highlights, which, you know, whatever. I mean, if you're watching Summer League, you might as well watch Iowa Wolves. But, yeah, I mean, he's been okay. I mean, he's had some good games here. I thought he played really physically. The Raptors want everybody to pressure the living heck out of the ball. So, like, we saw a little bit of that from him as well. He's been giving good effort on that front. Jameis Battle, he signed an Exhibit 10. We actually ran into his coach, which was kind of cool in the elevator. But, like, you know, he couldn't really get his game off today. Again, one of the limits when you can't really attack off the dribble is that you're kind of settling for threes. And it's very high variance. So there's another game where he can knock down a bunch of threes and all of a sudden look really competitive and really productive. And this one couldn't knock down his 2 threes, and all of a sudden, you know, his minutes are really limited and they're really cut. Other than that, I mean, you know, there just wasn't that much else. Like, I would love to see Grady eventually play again. Love to see Jonathan Mobo play again. I think for me, it's just like these are more data points, right? Like, you're not getting a full sort of thing. These are like, you know, like with the early releases of games, like you're beta testing basically some of these players, and you want to see where they succeed because that makes you excited, and you want to see where they fail because that gives you information and sort of how they're going to play. So I thought today was a good example of that. Not a lot of teams are going to be like Utah where they have 6'9" forwards everywhere and they switch everything. And, you know, also like Utah's done a better job of accumulating young players, right? Like they've prioritized getting more picks. They prioritize, you know, tanking in certain moments as well. And, you know, this is the result. They have a lot of talent, like Cody Williams, Taylor Hendricks, Kyle Filipowski, Isaiah Collier. Like, these are guys that they've taken in the last 2 years. And, you know, you could see sort of the physical profile alone how they could be very effective players. So I know Alex has been looking in the chat for some questions. So we're going to have them pull it up here for us. This one from Trash Clips. Okay, great. Assuming Ochai doesn't find a shot in the next 2 summer games, how long do the Raptors continue to try and make this work? I get that he's on a guaranteed contract, but he's already had a long run. So I think, number one, when you hear Masai speak about him, he really believes him as on a defensive end. Because there's sometimes where you don't even ask Masai about Ochai, and he just brings him up. You know, like I remember like the season-ending press conference, he did that. You know what I mean? And it's like he really believes in sort of what he can do. And he says he's described him as an elite defender. That alone is going to get you on the court a lot of the times. But it is a question of sort of where he's going to be offensively. And look, he's already been traded, well, technically twice in his career, but the first time, you know, he got drafted by Cleveland and got traded to Utah in the Donovan Mitchell trade. I'm not going to blame him for that. That's whatever, right? So, but this is the first time he's been traded since, you know, he's become an established NBA player. To have to sort of like reinvent yourself, that's a normal thing. A lot of people have to go through this where it's like the first little draft is sort of what you thought you could be in the NBA. You're not getting that opportunity, and you, quite frankly, you might not be that type of player, right? In college, when he was playing at Kansas, where he was a national champion, all that kind of stuff, like he was more featured. He can get his game off a little bit more. But at this level, it's harder for him to do that, right? Clearly, they're not looking for him to be a scoring type of guard, right? I don't know if he necessarily has the shooting profile to be like that elite at it. In the NBA, he's been okay in the corners and like just below average elsewhere, right? So what adjustments to your shot overall can you sort of improve in terms of your overall three-point shooting? Darko's already talked about it. Jama's already talked about it. He's talked about it. It's the small adjustments and then repping it out. Hopefully, that sort of fixes a couple of things. But even beyond that, right, it's like, well, what else can you do? Because it's not just about three-point shooting. It's also about like the in-between moments, recognizing when to cut, recognizing sort of like how to attack a closeout, things like that. And I think for the coaching staff, that's what they're really hoping to see from him. A couple things that was interesting to me was like even Jacoby, right? He didn't have the three ball going today, right? He was 0 for 6 from 3, right? He was still able to occasionally contribute because of the up fake, drawing the free throws, because you saw him making a couple of cuts, where a guy would drive and he would cut in from the strong side corner when he would read that, like, okay, this guy's driving not for a kick out to 3, but he's driving to try to score. Well, then I'm going to try to cut in as well to sort of present myself a little option behind the defense, and he got a couple baskets that way as well. Those are the little things that like he already inherently knows that I feel like for Ochai, he doesn't have that just yet. But I don't know if necessarily we got to like press too much out of like Ochai's got to make it. Like honestly, whether Ochai like develops an offensive game or not, that's not going to make or break the Raptors. It's only going to make or break Ochai. So I think he's got a defensive profile, and they're really looking to sort of revamp his offense. Clearly, by his own admission, right, which you can look at yesterday's practice, he knows he hasn't lived up to his own expectation. Opportunity hasn't been there, but like that's the progress, and he's got to maintain that positivity. He's a really nice kid. That's always something I'm becoming more partial to, especially the more and more I talk to these guys. But like, it's a process, and he's going to continue to work on it. And I know he's in year 3. I know he's in year 3 of Summer League. But the way the Raptors are looking at it, like they're almost revamping him from now. And I know that sounds like an excuse. I know his contract is obviously more limited, but they clearly believe in him. So I just want to see how the progress goes. Obviously, right now there's a lot to work on, and that's why they changed up a lot of his offense. So, but it's a fair question though, for sure. Let's go with the next question. This is from Frenchie SG. Greetings from Taiwan. Toronto Jiayo. Okay, yeah, Jiayo. Let's go. Keep up the good work. A moving podcast again. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Yeah, no, salute, man. Shouts to Taiwan. We didn't get out there this time. We were close, I guess. We went to Hong Kong and Guangzhou. But salute to all the NBA China fans. NBA Taiwan fans, everybody, like it's all love, It's actually really great to be able to speak Chinese on these podcasts once in a while. Let's look at the next question, guys. Yosef Cassidy. Okay, what game was Lou playing to lose 200 bones? It was poker. So first night we went to actually play. Unnamed people were playing blackjack. I was like not necessarily feeling it that night. I was kind of tired, so I'm like, I'm just gonna sit, just encourage them. City boys, shouts to City boys. But like, eventually, after a couple of nights, I'm like, all right, I got $200 in cash. Let's go to the poker tables. 1-2 stakes. No limit. I was up to like 270. Was doing pretty well. Had pocket jacks. The other person had ace 9. They caught the ace. I lost the coin flip. I was trying to either double up and call it a night, or lose my money and call it a night. And either way, I lost my money and called it a night. So. Yeah, Vegas, man. It's a toxic thing to come out here, but yeah, that was fun though. I guess it was fun. Next question. That's it. All right, no more questions, man. Well, you know what? I appreciate everybody. Obviously, viewership can be a little more hit or miss after losses, but we move. We move. There's more Summer League games coming up, and we will not be at Summer League anymore. We're actually leaving tomorrow, but we will try to recap the rest of the games as best as possible. So your 3 stars from this performance. Number one's obviously got to be Javon, 24 points. I know, like, for me, I want him to be a little bit more than just shooting. Oh. We're just saying hi? All right, we got leaked sources coming to say hi, man. Shouts to somebody who walked by. No, but that's amazing. But yeah, seriously, Javon, I know I want him to do a little bit more than scoring, but clearly, especially, that's number one, obviously, what he can do. And he's proven that at the Summer League level, at the G League level for multiple years now. It's just about, like, what other sort of, like, what else can you help other people do? You know what I mean? And so I feel like I'm always judging him on a little bit harder, on a more of a curve. But tonight, obviously, they needed him to score, and he did a good job of it. He's the only guy who could score for the Raptors. Your second star, I'm going to give that to Jamal. I know, like, offensively, there were lots of moments. He had some turnovers as well, which I know for him that, as a point guard, he's going to be a little upset with himself. But, like, I thought just defensively, you just go back and look at how many little hustle plays he made and how many deflections and how many, like, it is Lowry-esque in a way to me. So I do feel really great about that. I want to give the third star to Chomche. Again, go listen to the interview that he did post game because he was really describing sort of his upbringing and everything like that. I just think it's an amazing story. But I think for me, like the 3 games seeing him in person, he's actually been like less raw than I guess anticipated, and there are clearly lots of moments. Like I'm telling you, the amount of times you see point guards telling him where to go, coaches telling him where to go, everything like that. Even referees being like, "Yo, dude, we're not stopping the game so you could tie your shoelaces." Like there's so many small things like that. But for me, like there is the basis of like a good player there in the future, and the Raptors clearly feel invested in him, and that's why they took him, and we're going to continue to track his progress as well. Also, shouts to Ulrich because we saw him at practice yesterday, and we hadn't really met each other yet, and all of a sudden he just walks up to me and Jerome, and he goes, "Wagwan," and then he just walks off, doesn't say anything else. So, you know what? I don't know where he learned Wagwan from, but he became a Toronto man in record time. So, yeah, your Gerald Henderson Award winner for Who Killed the Raps. I got to go with Filipowski. Wow, Filipowski got 20 points? Okay, wow. You know what? You got to hand it to Flip, man. Shouts to Flip. He had a good game. I know that was an option, I suppose, for the Raptors in the second round, potentially. But, he was pretty established at Duke. He can, versatile player as a big, as a forward. He didn't really get the threes to drop, but he got more of the physicality around the rim, driving one-on-one. And, he got 20 points. It's kind of amazing, to be honest. So I want to say thank you to everyone watching. But in particular, thanks to people who have asked questions, and want to say a special thank you to Ryan and the Summer League studio powered by the Sports Business Classroom. When we came here, we didn't actually necessarily have like a studio option in mind. We were just going to like sit in the bowels of Thomas and Mac and just like film against a concrete wall. And to be provided with lights, to be provided with the set that we had the other day, and things like that, like that was actually really nice. So Jerome, Alex, what are you guys doing, man?
We're just chilling here. We're just pointing like the studio in the background that we normally would use. But shout out, Alex. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, Vegas is a beautiful place, man. The only bet that matters is the next one.
Wow.
Yeah. Look at all my friends. They're just off to the side. Look at all my studios. They're just off to the side. No, shouts to ESPN. Las Vegas. When you're in Las Vegas, keep it locked. But seriously, thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, we'll have more Summer League content. But appreciate everyone for following along. And just excited, man. The future starts now. So thanks everyone for listening to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway.